Chapter 6. The next time I saw Mr. Gurdjieff in New York a year or two later, I found that our relationship had changed in many ways. It had taken me several months to calm down after that nightmare journey to Chicago, and I came to feel that he had, by his behavior on that trip, forced me out of the pattern of hero worship which had unconsciously formed in me in relation to him. I no longer loved him in that unquestioning idealistic way, and I no longer looked back on my early years as I had, filled with pride because of my close relationship to the Master. I saw myself as having been useful in many very ordinary ways to a man who could always put people to use if they happened to be around him. At the next encounter with him, I greeted him more as a kind of equal, although not without a feeling of genuine respect, and I left the work of serving, dishwashing, and running errands to other more abject members of the group. He made no objection to my new attitude, and seemed content to treat me as a companion rather than a body slave. I must admit, however, that when we first met again, this time he was staying at the Great Northern Hotel, I came very close to falling back into the old pattern almost at once. Not only did he look weary and much older, but the atmosphere of the room, with milk cartons on the window sill and general disorder in the two small rooms, was shoddy. He sighed and groaned, complained about the lack of interest and enthusiasm on the part of his so-called followers, and the fact that he had no money and was forced to earn it, in addition to attending lectures, readings, dance groups, etc. My immediate natural response was to want to help him out in some way, but I managed to resist it this time. I did, however, go to see him. He had complained, among other things, of being lonely, and in the course of some of these visits I learned at first hand about some of the ways in which he earned money when it was not forthcoming in the nature of contributions from the disciples. I became acquainted with a stream of patients, at least they were not the usual followers, who came to him regularly for treatments of various kinds. Most of them were afflicted with something. They were alcoholics, dope addicts, just plain neurotics, homosexuals, and what could be called adult delinquents of one kind or another. I gathered that they paid him well to cure them of whatever disease or manifestation happened to be afflicting them. I do not know in what the cures consisted, except that all of them required long and frequent visits with him at all hours of the day or night, in fact, whenever he could spare the time. Whatever means were used, the effect on the individuals was the usual one. They worshipped him, at least temporarily. The difference between them and the group members was that in their case, the worship was, if possible, even more personal, and had nothing to do with his ideas or his method. And this was combined in most cases with gratitude for the cures. This period of having to earn money did not last very long, and it was a relief to me when it was over. I had not enjoyed my visits to Gurdjieff at that time, and I was glad when he emerged from this rather woe-begone characterization of a kind of quack doctor living in shoddy circumstances. I can only assume that he was able to earn enough money and perhaps cure enough people to give up what had never seemed much more than an impression to me. The derelicts also vanished from the scene. From that time on, when I did go to see him, I went to the child's restaurant, which he referred to as his office, and where he liked to sit and do his writing, and I also made a few short boat trips with him, usually to New Jersey. On one of those trips, when he was once more accompanied by several of the faithful, as I had now come to call the disciples, he introduced me to a man and a woman who were not, as he pointed out, carefully married. He said that the man liked to marry women and had been married and divorced several times, but that he had not yet married this woman, that he was, as it were, trying her out, and that, therefore, she was his handkerchief. He went on to give a long dissertation on the relations between the sexes. He said that there was something, a kind of relationship that rarely existed in modern times, that was worthy of the term real marriage. That marriage, as we knew it, was nothing more than a legal sexual intercourse, and that since most people, men and women, were sexually motivated and therefore needed variety, such relationships rarely lasted and usually ended in divorce. He said that there were occasional exceptions to this rule when a deeper, more valid relationship developed out of something that was purely sexual in the beginning, but that this was rare. Most relationships, whether legal or not, were merely that of a man and handkerchief, as witness this particular couple. For him, he said, this very convenient. He suddenly feel need or wish to blow nose, and always he have this handkerchief with him, and after blow nose, not necessary carry such excretion in pocket. This woman handkerchief can walk all by self, very, very convenient for modern man, especially convenient for this man, because for him, necessary blow nose very often is his favorite diversion. He smiled at the two of them after this description, and they smiled back at him. Once again, I was astonished at the way in which people accepted these pronouncements. Not that I expected protests of outrage, but this meek agreement always surprised me, and agreement alone was not enough. Usually they would manage to make some interpretation of just such a description of themselves that would turn out to be flattering to them, and would even go so far as to repeat their version of his comments, with, of course, their flattering interpretation to other group members. This conversation occupied us for most of the trip, and when we arrived at the house of some friends of his in New Jersey, he insisted that they take us to a local market, where he bought several pounds of garlic, which he said he required for the preparation of some special dish that he wanted to make. When we had made the purchase, we returned to our host's house, and he instructed everyone, 7 or 8 of us had come with him, to start peeling and otherwise preparing this mass of garlic. While I did not refuse outright to help with this chore, I simply did not participate, but sat with him on the terrace of the house and drank a good deal of applejack, which he had only recently discovered. After some time had passed, he suddenly asked me pointedly how it happened that I was not helping to clean garlic. I answered that I had not made the trip in order to clean garlic, that I simply did not want to help. He then asked me if I thought that I was in some way privileged, and I said, baiting him, that I did not really consider myself worthy of such important work. He poured us each another glass of applejack, and said that I would never be able to realize what trouble he had with his students, no matter how hard he worked with them. Just when they reached a stage where he thought he could rely on them, they turned out to be unreliable, etc. He added that I was a good example, a case in point. He had spent years involving an amount of effort that I could not even imagine, training me to be a worthy, reliable follower, and that now, just when it was important for me to help him with the cleaning of the garlic, I was failing him. I said that if I had learned anything from him, it was that one could not rely on others, particularly for such important tasks as garlic cleaning. He berated me for my irreverent manner of talking to him, and then suddenly switched the conversation. He told me that it was a great satisfaction, personally, to him to watch a group of his devoted followers faithfully performing a task which he had assigned to them. We paused to look at the 6 or 7 industrious followers working with the garlic, and I said, pouring another glass of applejack for each of us, that I could easily understand his pleasure, and that, for the time being, I was content to sit with him and share that particular joy. He then cursed me again for my lack of seriousness, but even so he laughed, and we continued to drink together. After a fairly long silence, he suddenly asked me why I had not been coming regularly to the group meetings, readings, etc., and I said that I did not feel that I qualified, but my attitude, or in my heart, as a proper follower, that I disagreed with the general feeling of worship that was accorded to him by most of the New York group, or any group, and was uncomfortable in their atmosphere. When I had said this, he looked at me quite seriously and said, "You remember I tell you that what I teach is in your blood, that you cannot forget no matter how you try?" And I said I did, and he said, "What you just tell me is proof of just this teaching. Group work is important. When people work together, they can help each other, can make work easier. But since you have not right feeling with group, you now make, unconsciously, difficulties and suffering for yourself. Just because of what I teach you in past, you now make extra struggles for yourself. This can be good for your future, but also very difficult. You poisoned for life." He did not say any more, and we continued to drink in silence until all the garlic was ready. He then told them to soak it in some sort of solution in a barrel, and that he would return at some future date to finish the concoction. I, at least, never heard of the garlic again.